Alright, there we go. Windows decided to update, and whenever it does, all the audio settings are just borked. Every time. Is BGM coming through? I think it's coming through. Hang on. Let me crank up my monitor. Okay, cool. Alright, yeah, so, as I was saying, this is our 5th reading from Alexandre Dumas's The Three Musketeers. We've had a lot of fun so far. We've had the antics and adventures of D'Artagnan as he's making his way in from the countryside. We've had the fumbles and foibles of the Musketeers as they stumble their way into success. And we've had the twisting and twining of court intrigue as the plot thickens and threatens to enclose our intrepid heroes. Yeah, that's exactly what happens. It resets my things, and especially since most of my audio devices are USB, Windows recognized them just fine, but OBS tends to like hard references, and when you refresh your devices, Windows is like, yeah, it's fine, it's the same device, we'll just keep on keeping on. OBS doesn't like that, so I have to go back through and reassign things and pray. Anyway, let's see. I forgot to move chat over, so just a second, I'll pop that over. There we go. Alright, so with all that, I do believe we are ready to jump back into things. I expect we'll be seeing from our quartet of heroes before too long today. Yet last night, and even a fair bit of the night before, was mostly intrigue and setting the stage for the problems to come. So I think it's about time we started to hear from the titular characters and had a little bit more lighthearted fun. So let's resume now with Chapter 18 of The Three Musketeers, Lover and Husband. "Ah, madame," said D'Artagnan, entering by the door which the young woman opened for him, "allow me to tell you that you have a bad sort of a husband." "You have, then, overheard our conversation?" asked Madame Bonacieux, eagerly, looking at D'Artagnan with disquiet. "The whole." "But how? My God!" "By a mode of proceeding known to myself, and by which I likewise overheard the more animated conversation which he had with the cardinal's police." "And what did you understand by what we said?" "1,000 things. In the first place, that, unfortunately, your husband is a simpleton and a fool. In the next place, you are in trouble, of which I am very glad, as it gives me an opportunity of placing myself at your service, and God knows I am ready to throw myself into the fire for you. Finally, that the Queen wants a brave, intelligent, devoted man to make a journey to London for her. I have at least 2 of the 3 qualities you stand in need of, and here I am." Madame Bonacieux made no reply, but her heart beat with joy, and secret hope shone in her eyes. "And what guarantee will you give me," asked she, "if I consent to confide this message to you?" "My love for you. Speak! Command! What is to be done?" My God, murmured the young woman. "Ought I to confide such a secret to you, monsieur? You are almost a boy." "I see that you require someone to answer for me. I admit that would reassure me greatly. Do you know Athos?" "No." "Porthos?" "No." "Aramis?" "No. Who are these gentlemen?" 3 of the king's musketeers." "Do you know Monsieur de Tréville, their captain?" "Oh, yes, I know him. Not personally, but from having heard the Queen speak of him more than once as a brave and loyal gentleman." "You do not fear lest he should betray you to the cardinal?" "Oh, no, certainly not." "Well, reveal your secret to him, and ask him whether, however important, however valuable, however terrible it may be, you may not confide it to me." But this secret is not mine, and I cannot reveal it in this manner. You were about to confide it to Monsieur Bonacieux, D'Artagnan said with chagrin. As one confides a letter to a hollow of a tree, to the wing of a pigeon, to the collar of a dog. And yet, me. You see plainly that I love you. You say so. I am an honorable man. You say so. I am a gallant fellow. I believe it. I am brave. Oh, I am sure of that. Then put me to the proof. Madame Bonacieux looked at the young man, restrained for a minute by a last hesitation. But there was such an ardor in his eyes, such persuasion in his voice, that she felt herself constrained to confide in him. Besides, she found herself in circumstances where everything must be risked for the sake of everything. The queen might be as much injured by too much reticence as by too much confidence. And, let us admit it, the involuntary sentiment which she felt for her young protector decided her to speak. "Listen," said she, "I yield to your protestations, I yield to your assurances, but I swear to you, before God who hears us, that if you betray me, and my enemies pardon me, I will kill myself while accusing you of my death. And I swear to you before God, madame," said D'Artagnan, "that if I am taken while accomplishing the orders you give me, I will die sooner than do anything that may compromise anyone." Then the young woman confided in him the terrible secret, of which chance had already communicated to him apart, in front of the Samaritain. This was their mutual declaration of love. D'Artagnan was radiant with joy and pride. This secret which he possessed, this woman who he loved, confidence and love made him a giant. "I go," said he. "I go at once." "How will you go?" said Madame Bonacieux. "And your regiment, your captain?" "By my soul, you had made me forget all that, my dear Constance. Yes, you are right. A furlough is needful." "Still another obstacle," murmured Madame Bonacieux sorrowfully. "As to that," cried D'Artagnan, after a moment of reflection, "I shall surmount it, be assured." "How so?" "I will go this very evening to Tréville, whom I will request to ask this favor of me of his brother-in-law, Monsieur d'Assas." "But another thing." "What?" asked D'Artagnan, seeing that Madame Bonacieux hesitated to continue. "You have perhaps no money?" "Perhaps is too much," said D'Artagnan, smiling. "Then," replied Madame Bonacieux, opening a cupboard and taking from it the very big bag which a half-hour before her husband had caressed so affectionately, "take this bag." "The cardinals," replied D'Artagnan, breaking into a loud laugh, he having heard, as may be remembered, that thanks to the broken boards, every syllable of the conversation between the mercer and his wife. "The cardinals," replied Madame Bonacieux. "You see, it makes a very respectable appearance." "Pardieu!" cried D'Artagnan, "it will be a double amusing fare to save the queen with the cardinal's money." "You are an amiable and charming young man," said Madame Bonacieux. "Be assured you will not find her majesty ungrateful." "Oh, I am already grandly recompensed," said D'Artagnan. "I love you. You permit me to tell you that I do. That is already more happiness than I dared to hope." "Silence," said Madame Bonacieux, starting. "What?" "Someone is talking in the street." "It is the voice of my husband. Yes, I recognize it." D'Artagnan ran to the door and pushed the bolt. "He shall not come in before I am gone," said he, "and when I am gone, you can open to him." "But I ought to be gone too, and the disappearance of his money. How am I to justify it if I am here?" "You are right. We must go out." "Go out? How? He will see us if we go out." "Then you must come up into my room." "Ah," said Madame Bonacieux, "you speak in a tone that frightens me." Madame Bonacieux pronounced these words with tears in her eyes. D'Artagnan saw those tears, and, much disturbed, softened, He threw himself at her feet. "With me you will be as safe as in a temple. I give you my word as a gentleman." "Let us go," said she. "I place full confidence in you, my friend." D'Artagnan drew back the bolt with precaution, and both, light as shadows, glided through the interior door into the passage, ascended the stairs as quietly as possible, and entered D'Artagnan's chambers. Once there, for greater security, the young man barricaded the door. They both approached the window, and through a slit in the shutter they saw Bonacieux talking with a man in a cloak. At sight of this man, D'Artagnan started, and half drawing his sword, sprang toward the door. It was the man of Meung. "What are you going to do?" cried Madame Bonacieux. "You will ruin us all." "But I have sworn to kill that man," said D'Artagnan. "Your life is devoted from this moment, and does not belong to you. In the name of the Queen, I forbid you to throw yourself into any peril which is foreign to that of your journey." "And do you command nothing in your own name?" "In my name," said Madame Bonacieux with great emotion, "in my name I beg you. But listen, they appear to be speaking of me." D'Artagnan drew near the window and lent his ear. Madame Bonacieux had opened his door, and seeing the apartment, Monsieur Bonacieux had opened his door, and seeing the apartment, had returned to the man in the cloak, whom he had left alone for an instant. "She is gone," said he. "She must have returned to the Louvre." "You are sure," replied the stranger, "that she did not suspect the intentions with which you went out?" "No," replied Bonacieux, with a self-sufficient air. "She is too superficial a woman." "Is the young gauzeman at home?" "I do not think he is. As you see, his shutter is closed, and you can see no light shine through the chinks of the shutters." "All the same, it is well to be certain." "How so?" "By knocking at his door. Go." "I will ask his servant." Bonacieux re-entered the house, passed through the same door that had afforded a passage for the two fugitives, went up to D'Artagnan's door, and knocked. No one answered. Porthos, in order to make a greater display, had that evening borrowed Planchet. As to D'Artagnan, he took great care not to give the least sign of existence. The moment the hand of Bonacieux sounded on the door, the two young people felt their hearts bound within them. "There is nobody within," said Bonacieux. "Never mind. Let us return to your apartment. We shall be safer there than in the doorway." "Oh, my God!" whispered Madame Bonacieux. "We shall hear no more." "On the contrary," said D'Artagnan, "we shall hear better." D'Artagnan raised 3 or 4 boards, which made his chamber another ear of Dionysus, spread a carpet on the floor, went upon his knees, and made a sign to Madame Bonacieux to stoop, as he did, toward the opening. "You are sure there is nobody there?" said the stranger. "I will answer for it," said Bonacieux. "And you think that your wife has returned to the Louvre?" "Without speaking to anyone but yourself." "I am sure of it." "That is an important point. Do you understand?" "Then the news I brought to you is of value?" "The greatest, my dear Bonacieux. I don't conceal this from you." "Then the cardinal will be pleased with me." "I have no doubt of it." "The great cardinal." "Are you sure, in her conversation with you, that your wife mentioned no names?" "I think not." "She did not name Madame de Chevreuse, the Duke of Buckingham, or Madame de Vernet?" "No. She only told me that she wished to send me to London to serve the interests of an illustrious personage." "The traitor!" murmured Madame Bonacieux. "Silence!" said D'Artagnan, taking her hand, which, without thinking of it, she abandoned to him. "Never mind," continued the man in the cloak. "You were a fool not to have pretended to accept the mission. You would then be in present possession of the letter. The state, which is now threatened, would be safe, and you—" "And I?" "Well, you, the cardinal, would have given you letters of nobility." "Did he tell you so?" "Yes, I know that he meant to afford you with that agreeable surprise." "Be satisfied," replied Bonacieux. "My wife adores me, and there is yet time." "The ninny!" murmured Madame Bonacieux. "Silence!" said D'Artagnan, pressing her hand more closely. "How is there still time?" asked the man in the cloak. "I go to the Louvre." I ask for Madame Bonacieux. I say that I have reflected. I renew the affair. I obtain the letter, and I run directly to the cardinal. Well, go quickly. I will return soon to learn the result of your trip. The stranger went out. Infamous, said Madame Bonacieux, addressing this epithet to her husband. Silence, said D'Artagnan, pressing her hand still more warmly. A terrible howling interrupted these reflections of D'Artagnan and Madame Bonacieux. It was her husband, who had discovered the disappearance of the money bag and was crying, Thieves! Oh my God! cried Madame Bonacieux. He will rouse the whole quarter. Bonacieux called a long time, but as such cries, on account of their frequency, brought nobody in the Rue des Fossoyeurs, and as lately the mercer's house had a bad name, finding that nobody came, he went out continuing to call, his voice being heard fainter and fainter, as he went in the direction of Rue de Bac. Now he is gone. It is your turn to get out, said Madame Bonacieux. Courage, my friend, but above all prudence, and think what you owe to the queen. To her and to you, cried D'Artagnan, be satisfied, beautiful Constance. I shall become worthy of her gratitude, but shall I likewise return worthy of your love? The young woman replied only by the beautiful glow which mounted to her cheeks. A few seconds afterward, D'Artagnan also went out, enveloped in a large cloak, which ill concealed the sheath of a long sword. Madame Bonacieux followed him with her eyes, with that long, fond look with which she had turned the angle of the street. She fell on her knees, and clasping her hands, "Oh, my God!" cried she, "protect the queen! Protect me!" This brings us to the end of chapter 18. So, we've seen a little bit more of D'Artagnan here, and he keeps running into his man of Mung, the cardinal's lackey, and always either escapes him or is otherwise held at bay, whether it be from the very start when the villagers knocked him out with sticks, or here where he was otherwise detained. So we'll see. Eventually they'll have their big confrontation, I'm sure. But not yet. D'Artagnan has better things to do. But at this point, I pretty well expect that he won't keep it exactly to himself. I bet he's going to go find his friends, and we'll see what mess they can make things of together. So let's continue with chapter 19 and see how things shake out. Plan of campaign. D'Artagnan went straight to Monsieur de Tréville's. He had reflected that in a few minutes the cardinal would be warned by this cursed stranger, who appeared to be his agent, and he judged, with reason, he had not a moment to lose. The heart of the young man overflowed with joy. An opportunity presented itself to him in which there would be at the same time glory to be acquired and money to be gained, and, as a far greater encouragement, it brought him into close intimacy with a woman he adored. This chance did then, for him, at once, more than he would have dared to ask of Providence. Monsieur de Tréville was in his saloon with his habitual court of gentlemen. D'Artagnan, who was known as a familiar of the house, went straight to his office, and sent word that he wished to see him on something of importance. D'Artagnan had been there scarcely 5 minutes when Monsieur de Tréville entered. At the first glance, and by the joy which was painted on his countenance, the worthy captain plainly perceived that something new was on foot. All the way along, D'Artagnan had been consulting with himself whether he should place confidence in Monsieur de Tréville, or whether he should only ask him to give him carte blanche for some secret affair. But Monsieur de Tréville had always been so thoroughly his friend, and always had been so devoted to the king and queen, and hated the cardinal so cordially, that the young man resolved to tell him everything. "Did you ask for me, my good friend?" said Monsieur de Tréville. "Yes, monsieur," said D'Artagnan, lowering his voice. and you will pardon me, I hope, for having disturbed you when you know the importance of my business. Speak then, I am all attention. It concerns nothing less, said D'Artagnan, than the honor, perhaps the life, of the Queen. What did you say? Asked Monsieur de Tréville, glancing round to see if they were surely alone, and then fixing his questioning look upon D'Artagnan. I say, monsieur, that chance has rendered me master of a secret, which you will guard, I hope, young man, as your life, but which I must impart to you, monsieur, for you alone can assist me in the mission I have just received from Her Majesty. Is this secret your own? No, monsieur, it is Her Majesty's. Are you authorized by Her Majesty to communicate it to me? No, monsieur, for, on the contrary, I am desired to preserve the profoundest mystery. Why, then, are you about to betray it to me? Because, as I said, without you I can do nothing, and I am afraid you will refuse me the favor I come to ask, if you do not know to what end I ask it. Keep your secret, young man, and tell me what you wish. I wish you to obtain for me, from Monsieur Dessart, leave of absence for 15 days. When? This very night. You leave Paris. I am going on a mission. May you tell me whither? To London. Has anyone an interest in preventing your arrival there? The Cardinal, I believe, would give the world to prevent my success. And you are going alone. I am going alone. In that case, you will not get beyond Bondy. I tell you so, by the faith of de Tréville. How so? You will be assassinated. And I shall die in the performance of my duty, but your mission will not be accomplished. That is true, replied D'Artagnan. Believe me, continued Tréville, in enterprises of this kind, in order that one may arrive, 4 must set out. Ah, you are right, monsieur, said D'Artagnan, but you know Athos, Porthos, and Aramis, and you know, if I can dispose of them, without confiding to them the secret, which I am not willing to know. We are sworn, once for all, to implicit confidence and devotedness against all proof. Besides, you can tell them that you have full confidence in me, and they will not be more incredulous than you. I can send to each of them leave of absence for 15 days. That is all. To Athos, whose wound still makes him suffer, to go to the waters of Fortis. To Porthos and Aramis, to accompany their friend, whom they are not willing to abandon in such a painful condition. Sending their leave of absence will be proof enough that I authorize their journey. Thanks, monsieur. You are 100 times too good. Begone, then. Find them instantly, and let it all be done tonight. Ha! But first, write your request to Dessart. Perhaps you had a spy at your heels, and your visit, if it should ever be known to the cardinal, will thus seem legitimate. D'Artagnan drew up his request, and Monsieur de Tréville, on receiving it, assured him that by 2 o'clock in the morning, the 4 leaves of absence should be at the respective domiciles of the travelers. Have the goodness to send mine to Athos' residence. I should dread some disagreeable encounter if I were to go home. Be easy. Adieu, and a prosperous voyage. A propos, said Monsieur Tréville, calling him back. D'Artagnan returned. Have you any money? D'Artagnan tapped the bag he had in his pocket. Enough? Enough? Asked Monsieur de Tréville. 300 pistoles. Ah, plenty. That would carry you to the end of the world. Begone, then. D'Artagnan saluted Monsieur de Tréville, who held out his hand to him. D'Artagnan pressed it with a respect mixed with gratitude. Since his first arrival at Paris, he had had constant occasion to honor this excellent man, whom he had always found worthy, loyal, and great. His first visit was to Aramis, at whose residence he had not been since the famous evening on which he had followed Madame Bonacieux. Still further, he had seldom seen the young musketeer, but every time he had seen him, he had remarked a deep sadness imprinted on his countenance. This evening especially, Aramis was melancholy and thoughtful. D'Artagnan asked some questions about this prolonged melancholy. Aramis pleaded as his excuse a commentary upon the 18th chapter of St. Augustine, which he was forced to write in Latin for the following week, and which preoccupied him a good deal. After the two friends had been chatting a few moments, a servant from Monsieur de Tréville entered, bringing a sealed packet. "What is that?" asked Aramis. "The leave of absence Monsieur has asked for," replied the lackey. "For me? I have asked for no leave of absence." "Hold your tongue and take it," said D'Artagnan. "And you, my friend, there is a demi-pistole for your trouble. You will tell Monsieur de Tréville that Monsieur Aramis is very much obliged to him. Go." The lackey bowed to him and departed. "What does all this mean?" asked Aramis. "Pack up all you want for a journey of a fortnight and follow me." "But I cannot leave Paris just now without knowing—" Aramis stopped. "What is become of her, I suppose you mean?" continued D'Artagnan. "Become of whom?" "The woman who was here, the woman with the embroidered handkerchief." "Who told you there was a woman here?" replied Aramis, becoming as pale as death. "I saw her." "And you know who she is?" "I believe I can guess, at least." "Listen," said Aramis. "Since you appear to know so many things, can you tell me what has become of that woman?" "I presume that she has returned to Tours." "To Tours? Yes, that may be. You evidently know her. But why did she return to Tours without telling me anything?" "Because she was in fear of being arrested." "Why has she not written to me, then?" "Because she was afraid of compromising you." "D'Artagnan, you restore me to life!" cried Aramis. "I fancied myself despised, betrayed. I was so delighted to see her again. I could not have believed she would risk her liberty for me. And yet, for what other cause could she have returned to Paris?" "For the cause which today takes us to England." "And what is this cause?" demanded Aramis. "Oh, you'll know it some day, Aramis. But at present, I must imitate the discretion of the doctor's niece." Aramis smiled, as he remembered the tale he had told his friends on a certain evening. "Well, then, since she has left Paris, and you are sure of it, D'Artagnan, nothing prevents me, and I am ready to follow you. You say we are going to see Athos now, and if you would come thither, I beg you to make haste, for we have lost much time already. A propos, inform Bazin." "Will Bazin go with us?" asked Aramis. "Perhaps so. At all events, it is best that he should follow us to Athos's." Aramis called Bazin, and after having ordered him to join them at Athos's residence, said, "Let us go, then," at the same time taking his cloak, sword, and 3 pistols, opening uselessly 2 or 3 drawers to see if he could not find any stray coin. When well assured this search was superfluous, he followed D'Artagnan, wondering to himself how this young guardsman should know so well who the lady was to whom he had given hospitality, and that he should know better than himself what had become of her. Only as they went out, Aramis placed his hand upon the arm of D'Artagnan, looking at him earnestly. "You have not spoken of this lady," said he, "to nobody in the world, not even to Athos or Porthos?" "I have not breathed a syllable to them." "Good enough." Tranquil on this important point, Aramis continued his way with D'Artagnan, and both soon arrived at Athos's dwelling. They found him holding his leave of absence in one hand, and Monsieur de Tréville's note in the other. "Can you explain to me what signify this leave of absence and this letter which I have just received?" said the astonished Athos. "My dear Athos, I wish, as your health absolutely requires it, that you should rest for a fortnight. Go, then, and take the waters of Forges, or any that may be more agreeable to you, and recuperate yourself as quickly as possible. Yours affectionate, de Tréville." "Well, this leave of absence and that letter mean that you must follow me, Athos, to the waters of Forges, there or elsewhere, in the king's service, either the king's or the queen's. Are we not their majesties' servants?" At that moment Porthos entered. "Pardieu!" said he, "here is a strange thing. Since when, I wonder, in the Musketeers, did they grant men leave of absence without their asking for it?" "Since," said D'Artagnan, "they have friends who ask it for them." "Ah, ha!" said Porthos. "It appears there's something fresh here." "Yes, we are going—" "To what country?" demanded Porthos. "My faith, I don't know much about it," said Athos. "Ask D'Artagnan." "To London, gentlemen," said D'Artagnan. To London! And what the devil are we going to do in London? Cried Porthos. That is what I am not at liberty to tell you, gentlemen. You must trust me. But in order to go to London, added Porthos, money is needed, and I have none. Nor I, said Aramis. Nor I, said Athos. I have, replied D'Artagnan, pulling out his treasure from his pocket and placing it on the table. There are in this bag 300 pistoles. Let each take 75. That is enough to take us to London and back. Besides, make yourselves easy. We shall not all arrive in London. Why so? Because, in all probability, some one of us will be left on the road. Is this, then, a campaign upon which we are now entering? One of a most dangerous kind, I give you notice. Ah, but if we do risk being killed, said Porthos, at least I should like to know what for. You would be all the wiser, said Athos. And yet, said Aramis, I am somewhat of Porthos's opinion. Is the king accustomed to give you such reasons? No. He says to you jauntily, Gentlemen, there is fighting going on in Gascony or in Flanders. Go and fight. And you go there. Why? You need give yourselves no more uneasiness about this. D'Artagnan is right, said Athos. Here are our 3 leaves of absence, which came from Monsieur de Tréville, and here are 300 pistoles, which came from I don't know where. So let us go and get killed where we are told to go. Is life worth the trouble of so many questions? D'Artagnan, I am ready to follow you. And I also, said Porthos. And I also, said Aramis. And indeed, I am not sorry to quit Paris. I had need of distraction. Well, you will have distractions enough, gentlemen. Be assured, said D'Artagnan. And now, when are we to go? Asked Athos. Immediately, replied D'Artagnan. We've not a minute to lose. Hello, Grimaud, Planchet, Mousqueton, Buzzin, cried the 4 young men, calling their lackeys. Clean my boots and fetch the horses from the hotel. Each musketeer was accustomed to leave at the general hotel, as at a barrack, his own horse and that of his lackey. Planchet, Grimaud, Mousqueton, and Bazin set off at full speed. Now, let us lay down the plan of campaign, said Porthos. Where do we go first? To Calais, said D'Artagnan. That is the most direct line to London. Well, said Porthos, this is my advice. Speak! 4 men traveling together would be suspected. D'Artagnan will give each of us his instructions. I will go by the way of Boulogne, to clear the way. Athos will set out 2 hours after, by that of Amiens. Aramis will follow us by that of Noyon. As to D'Artagnan, he will go by what route he thinks is best, in Planchet's clothes, while Planchet will follow us, like D'Artagnan, in the uniform of the guards. Gentlemen, said Athos, my opinion is that it is not proper to allow lackeys to have anything to do in such an affair. A secret may, by chance, be betrayed by gentlemen, but it is almost always sold by lackeys. Porthos's plan appears to me to be impracticable, said D'Artagnan, inasmuch as I am myself ignorant of what instructions I can give you. I am the bearer of a letter, that is all. I have not, and I cannot make 3 copies of that letter, because it is sealed. We must, then, as it appears to me, travel in company. This letter is here, in this pocket. And he pointed to the pocket which contained the letter. If I should be killed, one of you must take it and continue the route. If he be killed, it will be another's turn, and so on, provided a single one arrives. That is all that is required. Bravo, D'Artagnan. Your opinion is mine, cried Athos. Besides, we must be consistent. I am going to take the waters. You will accompany me. Instead of taking the waters of Forges, I go and take sea waters. I am free to do so. If anyone wishes to stop us, I will show Monsieur de Tréville's letter, and you will show your leaves of absence. If we are attacked, we will defend ourselves. If we are tried, we will stoutly maintain that we were only anxious to dip ourselves a certain number of times in the sea. They would have an easy bargain of 4 isolated men, whereas 4 men together make a troop. We will arm our 4 lackeys with pistols and musketoons. If they send an army out against us, we will give battle, and the survivor As D'Artagnan says, we'll carry the letter. Well said, cried Aramis. You don't often speak, Athos, but when you do speak, it is like St. John of the Golden Mouth. I agree to Athos's plan. And you, Porthos? I agree to it too, said Porthos, if D'Artagnan approves of it. D'Artagnan, being the bearer of the letter, is naturally the head of the enterprise. Let him decide, and we will execute. Well, said D'Artagnan, I decide that we should adopt Athos's plan, and that we set off in half an hour. Agreed, shouted the Three Musketeers in chorus. Each one, stretching out his hand to the bag, took his 75 pistoles, and made his preparation to set out at the time appointed. This brings us to the end of chapter 19, and so things are really starting to get underway. The Three Musketeers and D'Artagnan are getting ready to leave Paris on their grand adventure, and we'll see what sort of obstacles get in their way, because things never are easy. Certainly not with these four. All right. Exactly. There's not much plot if things just work, right? All right. So, next up we have Chapter 20, The Journey. At 2 o'clock in the morning, our four adventurers left Paris by Barrière Saint-Denis. As long as it was dark, they remained silent. In spite of themselves, they submitted to the influence of the obscurity, and apprehended ambushes on every side. With the first rays of day, their tongues were loosened. With the sun, gaiety revived. It was like the eve of a battle. The heart beat, the eyes laughed, and they felt that the life they were perhaps going to lose was, after all, a good thing. Besides, the appearance of the caravan was formidable. The black horses of the musketeers, their martial carriage with the regimental step of these noble companions of the soldier, would have betrayed the most strict incognito. The lackeys followed, armed to the teeth. All went well, till they arrived at Chantilly, which they reached about 8 o'clock in the morning. They needed breakfast, and alighted at the door of an auberge, recommended by a sign representing St. Martin giving half his cloak to a poor man. They ordered the lackeys not to unsaddle the horses, and to hold themselves in readiness to set off again immediately. They entered the common hall, and placed themselves at table. A gentleman, who had just arrived by the route of Dammartin, was seated at the same table, and was breakfasting. He opened the conversation about rain and fine weather. The travelers replied. He drank to their good health, and the travelers returned his politeness. But at the moment Mousqueton came to announce that the horses were ready, and they were arising from table, the stranger proposed to Porthos to drink the health of the cardinal. Porthos replied that he asked no better if the stranger, in his turn, would drink the health of the king. The stranger cried that he acknowledged no other king but his eminence. Porthos called him drunk, and the stranger drew his sword. You have committed a piece of folly, said Athos, but it can't be helped. There is no drawing back. Kill the fellow, and rejoin us as soon as you can. All three remounted their horses, and set out at a good pace, while Porthos was promising his adversary to perforate him with all the thrusts known in the fencing schools. There goes one, cried Athos at the end of 500 paces. But why did that man attack Porthos rather than any other one of us? Asked Aramis. Because, as Porthos was talking louder than the rest of us, he took him for the chief, said D'Artagnan. I always said that this cadet from Gascony was a well of wisdom, murmured Athos, and the travelers continued their route. At Beauvais, they stopped 2 hours, as well to breathe their horses a little as to wait for Porthos. At the end of 2 hours, as Porthos did not come, not any news of him, they resumed their journey. At a league from Beauvais, where the road was confined between two high banks, they fell in with 8 or 10 men who, taking advantage of the road being unpaved in this spot, appeared to be employed in digging holes and filling up the ruts with mud. Aramis, not liking to soil his boots with this artificial mortar, apostrophized them rather sharply. Athos wished to restrain him, but it was too late. The laborers began to jeer the travelers, and by their insolence disturbed the equanimity even of the cool Athos, who urged on his horse against one of them. Then each of these men retreated as far as the ditch, from which each took a concealed musket. The result was that our 7 travelers were outnumbered in weapons. Aramis received a ball which passed through his shoulder, and Mousqueton another ball which lodged in the fleshy part which prolongs the lower portion of the loins. Therefore, Mousqueton alone fell from his horse. Not because he was severely wounded, but not being able to see the wound, he judged it to be more serious than it really was. "It was an ambuscade!" shouted D'Artagnan. "Don't waste a charge! Forward!" Aramis, wounded as he was, yes, that was a sound. Aramis, wounded as he was, seized the mane of his horse, which carried him on with the others. Mousqueton's horse rejoined him, and galloped by the side of his companions. "That will serve us for a relay," said Athos. "I would rather have had a hat," said D'Artagnan. "Mine was carried away by a ball. By my faith, it is very fortunate that the letter was not in it." "They'll kill poor Porthos when he comes up," said Aramis. "If Porthos were on his legs, he would have rejoined us by this time," said Aramis. "My opinion is that on the ground that drunken man was not intoxicated." They continued at their best speed for 2 hours, although the horses were so fatigued that it was to be feared that they would soon refuse service. The travelers had chosen crossroads, in the hope that they might meet with less interruption. But at Crevaseux, Aramis declared that he could proceed no farther. In fact, it required all the courage which he concealed beneath his elegant form and polished manners to bear him so far. He grew more pale every minute, and they were obliged to support him on his horse. They lifted him off at the door of the cabaret, left Bazin with him, who, besides in a skirmish, was more embarrassing than useful, and set forward again in the hope of sleeping at Amiens. "Morbleu," said Athos, as soon as they were again in motion. "Reduced to 2 masters and Grimaud, and Planchet, morbleu! I won't be their dupe. I will answer for it. I will neither open my mouth nor draw my sword between this and Calais. I swear by—" "Don't waste your time in swearing," said D'Artagnan. "Let us gallop, if our horses will consent." And the travelers buried their rowels in the horses' flanks, who, thus vigorously stimulated, recovered their energies. They arrived at Amiens at midnight, and alighted at the auberge of the Golden Lily. The host had the appearance of as honest a man as any on earth. He received the travelers with his candlestick in one hand and his cotton nightcap in the other. He wished to lodge the 2 travelers, each in a charming chamber, but unfortunately these charming chambers were at the opposite extremes of the hotel. D'Artagnan and Athos refused them. The host replied that he had no other worthy of their excellencies, but the travelers declared that they would sleep in the common chamber, each on a mattress which might be thrown upon the ground. The host insisted, but the travelers were firm, and he was obliged to do as they wished. They had just prepared their beds and barricaded their door within, when someone knocked at the yard shutter. They demanded who was there, and recognizing the voices of their lackeys, opened the shutter. It was indeed Planchet and Grimaud. "Grimaud can take care of the horses," said Planchet. "If you are willing, gentlemen, I will sleep across your doorway, and you will then be certain that nobody can reach you." "And on what will you sleep?" said D'Artagnan. "Here is my bed," replied Planchet, producing a bundle of straw. "Come then," said D'Artagnan. "You are right. Mine host's face does not please me at all. It is too gracious." "Nor me either," said Athos. Planchet mounted by the window and installed himself across the doorway, while Grimaud went and shut himself in the stable. undertaking that by 5 o'clock in the morning he and the 4 horses should be ready. The night was quiet enough. Toward 2 o'clock in the morning, somebody endeavored to open the door, but as Planchet awoke in an instant and cried, "Who goes there?" somebody replied that he was mistaken, and went away. At 4 o'clock in the morning, they heard a terrible riot in the stables. Grimaud had tried to waken the stable boys, and the stable boys had beaten him. When they opened the window, they saw the poor lad lying senseless, with his head split by a blow with a pitchfork. Planchet went down into the yard, and wished to saddle the horses, but the horses were all used up. Mousqueton's horse, which had travelled for 5 or 6 hours without a rider the day before, might have been able to pursue the journey, but by an inconceivable error, the veterinary surgeon, who had been sent for, as it appeared, to bleed one of the host's horses, had bled Mousqueton's. This began to be annoying. All these successive accidents were perhaps the result of chance, but they might be the fruits of a ploy. Athos and D'Artagnan went out, while Planchet was sent to inquire if there were not 3 horses for sale in the neighborhood. At the door stood 2 horses, fresh, strong, and fully equipped. These would just have suited them. He asked where their masters were, and was informed that they had passed the night in the inn, and were then settling their bill with the host. Athos went down to pay the reckoning, while D'Artagnan and Planchet stood at the street door. The host was in a lower and back room, to which Athos was requested to go. Athos entered without the least mistrust, and took out 2 pistoles to pay the bill. The host was alone, seated before his desk, one of the drawers of which was partly open. He took the money which Athos offered him, and after turning it over and over in his hands, suddenly cried out that it was bad, and that he would have him and his companions arrested as forgers. "You blackguard!" cried Athos, going toward him. "I will cut your ears off." At the same instant, 4 men, armed to the teeth, entered by side doors and rushed upon Athos. "I am taken!" shouted Athos, with all the power of his lungs. "Go on, D'Artagnan! Spur! Spur!" And he fired 2 pistols. D'Artagnan and Planchet did not require twice bidding. They unfastened the 2 horses that were waiting at the door, leaped upon them, buried their spurs in their sides, and set off at full gallop. "Do you know what has become of Athos?" asked D'Artagnan of Planchet as they galloped on. "Ah, monsieur," said Planchet, "I saw one fall at each of his 2 shots, and he appeared to me through the glass door to be fighting with his sword and the others." "Brave Athos," murmured D'Artagnan. "And to think that we are compelled to leave him. Maybe the same fate awaits us 2 paces hence. Forward, Planchet, forward! You are a brave fellow." "As I told you, monsieur," replied Planchet, "Picards are found out by being used. Besides, I am here in my own country, and that excites me." And both, with free use of the spur, arrived at Saint-Omer without drawing a bit. At Saint-Omer they breathed their horses, with their bridles passed under their arms for fear of accident, and ate a morsel from their hands on the stones of the street. After they departed again. At 100 paces from the gates of Calais, D'Artagnan's horse gave out, and could not by any means be made to get up again, the blood flowing from his eyes and his nose. There still remained Planchet's horse, but he stopped short, and could not be made to move a step. Fortunately, as we have said, they were within 100 paces of the city. They left their 2 nags upon the high road, and ran toward the quay. Planchet called his master's attention to a gentleman who had just arrived with his lackey, and only preceded them by about 50 paces. They made all speed to come up to this gentleman, who appeared to be in great haste. His boots were covered with dust, and he inquired if he could not instantly cross over to England. "Nothing could be more easy," the captain of a vessel ready to set sail. "But this morning came an order to let no one leave without express permission from the cardinal." "I have that permission," said the gentleman, drawing the paper from his pocket. "Here it is." "Have it examined by the governor of the port," said the shipmaster, "and give me the preference." "Where shall I find the governor?" "At his country house." "And that is situated?" "At a quarter of a league from the city. Look, you may see it from here, at the foot of that little hill, that slated roof. Very well, said the gentleman, and with his lackey he took the road to the governor's country house. D'Artagnan and Planchet followed the gentleman at a distance of 500 paces. Once outside the city, D'Artagnan overtook the gentleman as he was entering a little wood. Monsieur, you appear to be in great haste? No one can be more so, monsieur. I am sorry for that, said D'Artagnan, for as I am in great haste likewise, I wish to beg you to render me a service. What? To let me sail first. That's impossible, said the gentleman. I have travelled 60 leagues in 40 hours, and by tomorrow in midday I must be in London. I have performed that same distance in 40 hours, and by 10 o'clock in the morning I must be at London. Very sorry, monsieur, but I was here first, and will not sail second. I am sorry too, monsieur, but I arrived second, and must sail first. The king's service, said the gentleman. My own service, said D'Artagnan. But this is a needless quarrel you seek with me, as it seems to me. Parbleu! What do you desire it to be? What do you want? What would you like to know, certainly? Well, then, I wish that order of which you are bearer, seeing that I have not one of my own, and must have one. You jest, I presume. I never jest. Let me pass. You shall not pass. My brave young man, I will blow out your brains. Hola, Lubin, my pistols! Planchet, called out D'Artagnan, take care of the lackey. I will manage the master. Planchet, emboldened by the first exploit, sprang upon Lubin, and, being strong and vigorous, he soon got him on the broad of his back, and placed his knee upon his breast. Go on with your affair, monsieur, cried Planchet. I have finished mine. Seeing this, the gentleman drew his sword and sprang upon D'Artagnan, but he had too strong an adversary. In 3 seconds, D'Artagnan had wounded him 3 times, exclaiming at each thrust, "One for Athos, one for Porthos, one for Aramis!" At the 3rd hit, the gentleman fell like a log. D'Artagnan believed him to be dead, or at least insensible, and went toward him for the purpose of taking the order. But the moment he extended his hand to search for it, the wounded man, who had not dropped his sword, plunged the point into D'Artagnan's breast, crying, "One for you!" "And one for me, the best for last!" cried D'Artagnan, furious, nailing him to the earth with a 4th thrust through the body. This time, the gentleman closed his eyes and fainted. D'Artagnan searched his pockets, and took from one of them the order for the passage. It was in the name of Comte de Wardes. Then, casting a glance on the handsome young man, who was scarcely 25 years of age, and whom he was leaving in his gore, deprived of sense and perhaps dead, he gave a sigh for that unaccountable destiny, which leads men to destroy each other for the interests of people who are strangers to them, and who often do not even know they exist. But he was soon aroused from these reflections by Lubin, who uttered loud cries and screamed for help with all his might. Planchet grasped him by the throat, and pressed as hard as he could. "Monsieur," said he, "as long as I hold him in this manner, he can't cry. I'll be bound, but as soon as I let go, he will howl again. I know him for a Norman, and Normans are obstinate." In fact, tightly held as he was, Lubin endeavored still to cry out. "Stay!" said D'Artagnan, taking out his handkerchief and gagged him. "Now," said Planchet, "let us bind him to a tree." This being properly done, they drew the Comte de Wardes close to his servant, and as night was approaching, and as the wounded man and the bound man were at some little distance within the wood, it was evident they were likely to remain there till the next day. "And now," said D'Artagnan, "to the governor's." "But you are wounded, it seems," said Planchet. "Oh, that's nothing. Let us attend to what is more pressing first, and then we will attend to my wound. Besides, it does not seem very dangerous." Did it? Okay, hang on, let me check. I've got good sound coming through here. No, I think I'm coming in. My monitor shows up. Do I still have no sound? I think I see it coming through on my end when I'm watching here. But let's be sure. Yeah? Yeah, I think we're alright. Okay, yeah. I can see it on my random browser, so I think we're okay, but I'll give you a minute. In the meantime, we've had some action in this chapter. But it is also rather fast-paced in how quickly the Musketeers are dropping off. So, it's interesting how it's gone. That is odd. Let me double check. Well, I'm going to open up a new tab and see if that does anything different. Alright, test, test, test. I want to hear if I can hear this. Unmute here. Yeah, I think I'm okay here. Okay. That's strange how that shook out. I didn't make any changes on my side, so I think it may have been YouTube pulling tricks on you there. But it is what it is. So, we good? Alright, let's see. I'll just take this from the top of the page, because I'm not sure where it cut out. Planchet grasped him by the throat and pressed as hard as he could. "Monsieur," said he, "as long as I hold him in this manner, he can't cry. I'll be bound, but as soon as I let go, he will howl again. I know him for a Norman, and Normans are obstinate." In fact, tightly held as he was, Lupin endeavored still to cry out. "Stay," said D'Artagnan, and taking out his handkerchief, he gagged him. "Now," said Planchet, "let us bind him to a tree." This being properly done, they drew the Comte de Ward close to his servant, and as night was approaching, and as the wounded man and the bound were at some little distance within the wood, it was evident they were likely to remain there till the next day. "And now," said D'Artagnan, "to the governor's." "But you are wounded, it seems," said Planchet. "Oh, that's nothing. Let us attend to what is more pressing first, and then we will attend to my wound. Besides, it does not seem very dangerous." And they both set forward as fast as they could toward the country house of the worthy functionary. The Comte de Ward was announced, and D'Artagnan was introduced. "You have an order signed by the cardinal," said the governor. "Yes, monsieur. Here it is." Ah! It is quite regular and explicit," said the governor. "Most likely," said D'Artagnan, "I am one of his most faithful servants. It appears that his eminence is anxious to prevent someone from crossing to England. Yes, a certain D'Artagnan, a Béarnese gentleman who left Paris in company with 3 of his friends, with the intention of going to London." "Do you know him personally?" asked the governor. "Whom?" "This D'Artagnan." "Perfectly well. Describe him to me, then." "Nothing more easy." And D'Artagnan gave, feature for feature, a description of the Comte de Ward. "Is he accompanied?" "Yes, by a lackey named Lupin." "We will keep a sharp lookout for them, and if we lay hands on them, his eminence may be assured they will be reconducted to Paris under a good escort." "And by doing so, monsieur the governor," said D'Artagnan, "you will deserve well of the cardinal." "Shall you see him when you return, monsieur count?" "Without a doubt. Tell him, I beg you, that I am his humble servant." "I will not fail." Delighted with this assurance, the governor countersigned the passport and delivered it to D'Artagnan. D'Artagnan lost no time in useless compliments. He thanked the governor, bowed, and departed. Once outside, he and Planchet set off as fast as they could, and by making a long detour, avoided the wood and re-entered the city by another gate. The vessel was quite ready to sail, and the captain was waiting on the wharf. "Well," said he, on perceiving D'Artagnan, "here is my pass, countersigned," said the latter, And that other gentleman? He will not go today, said D'Artagnan. But here, I'll pay you for us too. In that case, let us go, said the shipmaster. Let us go, repeated D'Artagnan. He leaped with Planchet into the boat, and 5 minutes after they were on board. It was time, for they had scarcely sailed half a league when D'Artagnan saw a flash and heard a detonation. It was the cannon which announced the closing of the port. He had now leisure to look at his wound. Fortunately, as D'Artagnan had thought, it was not dangerous. The point of the sword had touched a rib and glanced along the bone. Still further, his shirt had stuck to the wound, and he had only lost a few drops of blood. D'Artagnan was worn out with fatigue. A mattress was laid upon the deck for him. He threw himself upon it and fell asleep. On the morrow, at break of day, they were still 3 or 4 leagues from the coast of England. The breeze had been so light all night that they had made but little progress. At 10 o'clock, the vessel cast anchor in the harbor of Dover, and at 10:30, D'Artagnan placed his foot on English land, crying, "Here I am at last!" But that was not all. They must get to London. In England, the post was well served. D'Artagnan and Planchet took each a post-horse, and a postilion rode before them. In a few hours they were in the capital. D'Artagnan did not know London. He did not know a word of English, but he wrote the name of Buckingham on a piece of paper, and everyone pointed out to him the way to the Duke's hotel. The Duke was at Windsor, hunting with the king. D'Artagnan inquired for the confidential valet of the Duke, who, having accompanied him in all his voyages, spoke French perfectly well. He told him that he came from Paris on an affair of life and death, and that he must speak with his master instantly. The confidence with which D'Artagnan spoke convinced Patrick, which was the name of the minister of this minister of the minister. He ordered 2 horses to be saddled, and himself went as guide to the young guardsman. As for Planchet, he had been lifted from his horse as stiff as a rush. The poor lad's strength was almost exhausted. D'Artagnan seemed iron. On their arrival at the castle, they learned that Buckingham and the king were hawking in the marshes 2 or 3 leagues away. In 20 minutes they were on the spot named. Patrick soon caught the sound of his master's voice calling his falcon. "Whom must I announce to my Lord Duke?" asked Patrick. The young man who one evening sought a quarrel with him on the Pont Neuf, opposite the Samaritain. A singular introduction. You will find that it is as good as another. Patrick galloped off, reached the Duke, and announced to him in the terms directed that a messenger awaited him. Buckingham at once remembered the circumstance, and, suspecting that something was going on in France of which it was necessary he should be informed, he only took the time to inquire where the messenger was, and recognizing from afar the uniform of the guards, he put his horse into a gallop and rode straight up to D'Artagnan. Patrick discreetly kept in the background. "No misfortune has happened to the Queen?" cried Buckingham, the instant he came up, throwing all his fear and love into the question. "I believe not. Nevertheless, I believe she runs some great peril from which your grace alone can extricate her." "I?" cried Buckingham. "What is it? I should be too happy to be of any service to her. Speak, speak!" "Take this letter," said D'Artagnan. "This letter? From whom comes this letter? From Her Majesty, I think." "From Her Majesty," said Buckingham, becoming so pale that D'Artagnan feared he would faint as he broke the seal. "What is this rent?" said he, showing D'Artagnan a place where it had been pierced through. "Ah!" said D'Artagnan, "I did not see that. It was the sword of the Comte de Ward which made that hole, when he gave me a good thrust in the breast." "You are wounded?" asked Buckingham, as he opened the letter. "Ah, nothing but a scratch," said D'Artagnan. "Just heaven! What have I read?" cried the Duke. "Patrick, remain here, or rather join the king, wherever he may be, and tell his Majesty that I humbly beg him to excuse me, but an affair of the greatest importance recalls me to London. Come, monsieur, come!" And both set off toward the capital at full gallop. That brings us to the end of chapter 20. So we've had our adventure, that's for sure. They the flight from Paris, the fraught falling one by one as the 3-4 friends are separated, and finally the arrival in London after having duped the Cardinal's man. So the message has been delivered. Nonetheless, a little worse for wear, having been a little bit torn asunder a little bit. It's fine. And yeah, it definitely felt like a random D&D session with someone who has very poor luck on those passive perception rolls. There's a lot of random things happening, and things just going awry. Alright, let's take a few minutes now, top up our drinks, stretch our legs, and we'll be back in just a little while, where we'll continue and see how the Duke reacts to the letter that contains his and the Queen's fate. Alright, be back in just a little bit, guys. Thanks. Alright, we are settled back in. I've topped up the glass. So, let's see. Let's go ahead and jump right back into it. We've got probably another 2 chapters in us tonight. Maybe 3, depending on how long they are. So we'll see whether we can get any resolution to this bizarre trip, or whether things will continue to find new and creative ways to go sideways. So let us continue now with chapter 21, the Countess de Winter. As they rode along, the Duke endeavored to draw from D'Artagnan not all that had happened, but what D'Artagnan himself knew. By adding all that he heard from the mouth of the young man to his own remembrances, he was enabled to form a pretty exact idea of a position of the seriousness of which, for the rest, the Queen's letter, short but explicit, gave him the clue. But that which astonished him most was that the Cardinal, so deeply interested in preventing this young man from setting his foot in England, had not succeeded in arresting him on the road. It was then, upon the manifestation of this astonishment, that D'Artagnan related to him the precaution taken, and how, thanks to the devotion of his 3 friends, whom he had left scattered and bleeding on the road, he had succeeded in coming off with a single sword thrust, which had pierced the Queen's letter, and for which he had repaid Monsieur de Wardes with such terrible coin. While he was listening to this recital, delivered with the greatest simplicity, the Duke looked from time to time at the young man with astonishment, as if he could not comprehend how so much prudence, courage, and devotedness could be allied with a countenance which indicated not more than 20 years. The horses went like the wind, and in a few minutes they were at the gates of London. D'Artagnan imagined that on arriving in town the Duke would slacken his pace, but it was not so. He kept on his way at the same rate, heedless about upsetting those whom he met on the road. In fact, in crossing the city 2 or 3 accidents of this kind happened, but Buckingham did not even turn his head to see what became of those he had knocked down. D'Artagnan followed him amid cries which strongly resembled curses. On entering the court of this hotel, Buckingham sprang from his horse, and without thinking what became of the animal, threw the bridle on his neck and sprang toward the vestibule. D'Artagnan did the same, with a little more concern, however, for the noble creatures, whose merits he fully appreciated. But he had the satisfaction of seeing 3 or 4 grooms run from the kitchens and the stables, and busy themselves with the steeds. The Duke walked so fast that D'Artagnan had some trouble in keeping up with him. He passed through several apartments of an elegance of which even the greatest nobles of France had not even an idea, and arrived at length in a bedchamber, which at once was a miracle of taste and of richness. In the alcove of this chamber was a door concealed in the tapestry, which the Duke opened with a little gold key, which he wore suspended from his neck by a chain of the same metal. With discretion, D'Artagnan remained behind, but at the moment when Buckingham crossed the threshold, he turned round, and seeing the hesitation of the young man, "Come in," cried he, "and if you have the good fortune to be admitted to her Majesty's presence, tell her what you have seen." Encouraged by this invitation, D'Artagnan followed the Duke, who closed the door after them. The 2 found themselves in a small chapel, covered with a tapestry of Persian silk worked with gold, and brilliantly lighted with a vast number of candles. Over a species of altar, and beneath a canopy of blue velvet, surmounted by white and red plumes, was a full-length portrait of Anne of Austria, so perfect in its resemblance that D'Artagnan uttered a cry of surprise on beholding it. One might believe the Queen was about to speak. On the altar, beneath the portrait, was the casket containing the diamond studs. Quick aside, this isn't even the strangest random shrine that we've seen in our readings. We've read Lovecraft. There's some weirder shrines out there than a guy setting up a shrine to his paramour. This is still weird, but we've seen stranger. Just, perspective. It's important, right? The Duke approached the altar, knelt as a priest might have done before a crucifix, and opened the casket. "There," said he, drawing from the casket a large bow of blue ribbon, all sparkling with diamonds. "There are the precious studs which I have taken an oath should be buried with me. The Queen gave them to me. The Queen requires them again. Her will be done, like that of God in all things." That is true. That's kind of a low bar. It's hard to get weirder than some of the things we've seen. But it still needs to be said, right? You can't give the Duke a complete pass. It's kind of weird here, but we're a little jaded around here. Then he began to kiss, one after the other, those dear studs, with which he was about to part. All at once, he uttered a terrible cry. "What is the matter?" declared D'Artagnan anxiously. "What has happened to you, my lord?" "All is lost!" cried Buckingham, becoming as pale as a corpse. "2 of the studs are wanting. There are only 10. "Can you have lost them, my lord? Or did you think they have been stolen?" "They have been stolen," replied the Duke, "and it is the cardinal who has dealt this blow. Hold! See! The ribbons which held them have been cut with scissors." "If my lord suspects they have been stolen, perhaps the person who stole them still has them in his hands." Wait, said the Duke. "The only time I have worn these studs was at a ball given by the king 8 days ago at Windsor. The Comtesse de Winter, with whom I have quarrelled, became reconciled to see me at that ball. That reconciliation was nothing but the vengeance of a jealous woman. I have never seen her from that day. The woman is an agent of the cardinal." Yeah, you know what? Now that you mention, I think I've seen worse as well. You ever walk into somebody's house where they've got a shrine of figures of questionable taste? That's worse than this. Yeah. That's significantly worse than this. "He has agents, then, throughout the world?" cried D'Artagnan. "Oh, yes," said Buckingham, grating his teeth with rage. "Yes, he is a terrible antagonist. But when is this ball to take place?" "Monday next." "Monday next! Still 5 days before us. That's more time than we want. Patrick!" cried the Duke, opening the door of the chapel. "Patrick!" His confidential valet appeared. "My jeweler and my secretary." The valet went out with a mute promptitude, which showed him accustomed to obey blindly and without reply. But although the jeweler had been mentioned first, it was the secretary who first made his appearance. This was simply because he lived in the hotel. He found Buckingham seated at a table in his bedchamber, writing orders with his own hand. "Mr. Jackson," said he, "go instantly to the Lord Chancellor, and tell him that I charge him with the execution of these orders. I wish them to be promulgated immediately." "But, my lord, if the Lord Chancellor interrogates me upon the motives which may have led your grace to adopt such extraordinary measure, what shall I reply?" "That such is my pleasure, and that I answer for my will to no man." "Will that be the answer?" replied the secretary, smiling, "which he must transmit to his Majesty if, by chance, his Majesty should have the curiosity to know why no vessel is to leave any of the ports of Great Britain?" "You are right, Mr. Jackson," replied Buckingham. "He will say, in that case, to the king, that I am determined on war, and that this measure is my first act of hostility against France." The secretary bowed and retired. "We are safe on that side," said Buckingham, turning toward D'Artagnan. "If the studs are not yet gone to Paris, they will not arrive till after you." "How so?" "I have just placed an embargo on all vessels at present in his Majesty's ports, and without particular permission, not one dare lift an anchor." D'Artagnan looked with stupefaction at a man who thus employed the unlimited power with which he was clothed by the confidence of a king in the prosecution of his intrigues. Buckingham saw by the expression of the young man's face that what was passing in his mind, and he smiled. "Yes," said he, "yes, Anne of Austria is my true queen. Upon a word from her, I would betray my country. I would betray my king. I would betray my God. She asked me not to send the Protestants of La Rochelle the assistance I promised them. I have not done so. I broke my word, it is true, but what signifies that? I obeyed my love, and have I not been richly paid for that obedience? It was to that obedience I owe her portrait." D'Artagnan was amazed to note by what fragile and unknown threads the destinies of nations and the lives of men are suspended. He was lost in these reflections when the goldsmith entered. He was an Irishman, one of the most skillful of his craft, and who himself confessed that he gained 100,000 livres a year by the Duke of Buckingham. "Mr. O'Reilly," said the Duke, leading him into the chapel, "look at these diamond studs, and tell me what they are worth apiece." The goldsmith cast a glance at the elegant manner in which they were set, calculated one with another what the diamonds were worth, and without hesitation said, 1,500 pistoles each, my lord." "How many days would it require to make 2 studs exactly like them? You see, there are 2 wanting." 8 days, my lord." "I will give you 3,000 pistoles apiece, if you can have them by the day after tomorrow. My lord, they shall be yours. You are a jewel of a man, Mr. O'Reilly, but that is not all. These studs cannot be trusted to anybody. It must be done in the palace." "Impossible, my lord. There's no one but myself can so execute them that one cannot tell the new from the old. Therefore, my dear Mr. O'Reilly, you are my prisoner, and if you wish ever to leave my palace, you cannot. So make the best of it. Name to me such of your workmen as you need, and point out the tools they must bring." The goldsmith knew the Duke. He knew all objection would be useless, and instantly determined how to act. "May I be permitted to inform my wife?" said he. "Oh, you may even see her if you like, my dear Mr. O'Reilly. Your captivity shall be mild, be assured, and as every inconvenience deserves an indemnification, here is, in addition to the price of the studs, an order for 1,000 pistoles, to make you forget the annoyance I cause you." D'Artagnan could not get over the surprise created in him by this minister, who thus open-handed sported with men and millions. As to the goldsmith, he wrote to his wife, sending her the order for the 1,000 pistoles, and charging her to send him, in exchange, his most skillful apprentice, an assortment of diamonds, of which he gave the names and the weight, and the necessary tools. Buckingham conducted the goldsmith to the chamber destined for him, and which, at the end of half an hour, was transformed into a workshop. Then he placed a sentinel at each door, with an order to admit nobody upon any pretense but his valet de chambre, Patrick. We need not add that the goldsmith O'Reilly and his assistant were prohibited from going out under any pretext. This point settled, the Duke turned to D'Artagnan. "Now, my young friend," said he, "England is all our own. What do you wish for? What do you desire?" "A bed, my lord," replied D'Artagnan. "At present, I confess, that is the thing I stand most in need of." Buckingham gave D'Artagnan a chamber adjoining his own. He wished to have the young man at hand, not that he at all mistrusted him, but for the sake of having someone to whom he could constantly talk of the Queen. In 1 hour after, the ordinance was published in London that no vessel bound for France should leave port, not even the packet boat with letters. In the eyes of everybody, this was a declaration of war between the 2 kingdoms. On the day after the morrow, by 11 o'clock, the 2 diamond studs were finished, and they were so completely imitated, so perfectly alike, that Buckingham could not tell the new ones from the old ones, and experts in such matters would have been deceived as he was. He immediately called D'Artagnan. "Here," said he to him, "are the diamond studs that you came to bring, and be my witness that I have done all that human power could do." "Be satisfied, my lord. I will tell all that I have seen. But does your grace mean to give me the studs without the casket?" the casket would encumber you. Besides, the casket is the more precious from being all that is left to me. You will say that I keep it. I will perform your commission, word for word, my lord. And now, resumed Buckingham, looking earnestly at the young man, how shall I ever acquit myself of the debt I owe you? D'Artagnan blushed up to the whites of his eyes. He saw that the Duke was searching for means of making him accept something, and the idea that the blood of his friends and himself was about to be paid for with English gold was strangely repugnant to him. "Let us understand each other, my lord," replied D'Artagnan, "and let us make things clear beforehand, in order that there may be no mistake. I am in the service of the King and Queen of France, and form part of the company of Monsieur de Sade, who, as well as his brother-in-law, Monsieur de Treville, is particularly attached to their majesties. What I have done, then, has been for the Queen, and not at all for your grace. And still further, it is very probable I should not have done anything of this, if it had not been to make myself agreeable to someone who is my lady, as the Queen is yours." "Yes," said the Duke, smiling, "and I even believe that I know that other person. It is—" "My lord, I have not named her," interrupted the young man warmly. "That is true," said the Duke, "and it is to this person I am bound to discharge my debt of gratitude." "You have said, my lord, for truly, at this moment, when there is question of war, I confess to you that I see nothing in your grace but an Englishman, and consequently an enemy whom I should have much greater pleasure in meeting on the field of battle than in the park at Windsor or the corridors of the Louvre. All which, however, will not prevent me from executing to the very point my commission, or from laying down my life, if there be need of it, to accomplish it. But I repeat it to your grace, without your having personally on that account more to thank me for in this second interview than for what I did for you in the first." "We say proud as a Scotsman," murmured the Duke of Buckingham. "And we say proud as a Gascon," replied D'Artagnan. "The Gascons are the Scots of France." D'Artagnan bowed to the Duke, and was retiring. "Well, are you going away in that matter? Where, and how?" "That's true." "Oh, God! These Frenchmen have no consideration. I had forgotten that England was an island, and that you were the king of it. Go to the riverside, ask for the brig Sund, and give this letter to the captain. He will convey you to a little port, where certainly you are not expected, and which is ordinarily only frequented by fishermen. The name of that port? St. Valery. But listen, when you have arrived there, you will go to a mean tavern, without a name and without a sign, a mere fisherman's hut. You cannot be mistaken, there is but one. Afterward, you will ask for the host, and will repeat to him the word forward, which means, in French, en avant. It is the password. He will give you a horse all saddled, and will point out to you the road you ought to take. You will find, in the same way, 4 relays on your route. If you will give at each of these relays your address in Paris, the 4 horses will follow you thither. You already know 2 of them, and you appear to appreciate them like a judge. They were like those we rode on, and you may rely upon me for the others not being inferior to them. These horses are equipped for the field. However proud you may be, you will not refuse to accept one of them, and to request your 3 companions to accept the others. That is, in order to make war against us. Besides, the end justified the means, as you Frenchmen say, does it not?" "Yes, my lord, I accept them," said D'Artagnan, "and if it please God, we will make a good use of your presence." "Well, now, your hand, young man. Perhaps we shall soon meet on the field of battle, but in the meantime, we shall part good friends, I hope." "Yes, my lord, but with the hope of soon becoming enemies." "Be satisfied, I promise you that. I depend on your word, my lord." D'Artagnan bowed to the Duke, and made his way as quickly as possible to the riverside. Opposite the Tower of London, he found the vessel that had been named to him, delivered his letter to the captain, who, after having it examined by the governor of the port, made immediate preparations to sail. 50 vessels were waiting to set out. Passing alongside one of them, D'Artagnan fancied he perceived on board it the woman of Meung, the same whom the unknown gentleman had called Milady. and whom D'Artagnan had thought so handsome. But thanks to the current of the stream and a fair wind, his vessel passed so quickly that he had little more than a glimpse of her. The next day, about 9 o'clock in the morning, he landed at St. Valery. D'Artagnan went instantly in search of the inn, and easily discovered it by the riotous noise which resounded from it. War between England and France was talked of as near and certain, and the jolly sailors were having a carousal. D'Artagnan made his way through the crowd, advanced toward the host, and pronounced the word "Forward!" The host instantly made him a sign to follow, went out with him by a door which opened into a yard, and led him to the stable, where a saddled horse awaited him, and asked him if he stood in need of anything else. "I want to know the route I am to follow," said D'Artagnan. "Go from hence to Blangy, and from Blangy to Neuchâtel, and Neuchâtel to the Tavern of the Golden Harrow. Give the password to the landlord, and you will find, as you have here, a horse ready saddled." "Have I anything to pay?" demanded D'Artagnan. "Everything is paid," replied the host, "and liberally. Begone, and may God guide you." "Amen," said the young man, and set off at full gallop. 4 hours later, he was in Neuchâtel. He strictly followed the instructions he had received, and Neuchâtel, as at St. Valery, he found a horse quite ready and awaiting him. He was about to remove the pistols from the saddle he had quit to the one he was about to fill, but found the holsters furnished with similar pistols. "Your address at Paris, Hotel of the Guards, Company of Dessart." "Enough," replied the questioner. "Which route must I take?" demanded D'Artagnan in his turn. "There." "That of Rouen. But you will leave the city on your right. You must stop at the little village of Écueil, in which there is but one tavern, the Shield of France. Don't condemn it from appearances. You will find a horse in the stables quite as good as this." "The same password?" "Exactly. Adieu, master. A good journey, gentlemen. Do you want anything?" D'Artagnan shook his head, and set off at full speed. At Écueil, the same scene was repeated. He found as provident a host and a fresh horse. He left his address as he had done before, and set off again at the same pace for Pontoise. At Pontoise, he changed his horse for the last time, and at 9 o'clock galloped into the yard of Tréville's hotel. He had made nearly 60 leagues in little more than 12 hours. Monsieur de Tréville received him as if he had seen him that same morning. Only, when pressing his hand a little more warmly than usual, he informed him that the Company of Dessart was on duty at the Louvre, and that he might repair at once to his post. That brings us to the end of chapter 21. So this has gone absolutely wild with the pacing. The last two sessions were a little bit more careful. I won't say plotting, but they were slower, more deliberate. It was the laying of the schemes, the plot thickening, and the threads tightening around the characters. But as from this get-go, from tonight, from the very first word we've read, it has gone absolutely off the rails. And yes, that was a wonderful exchange. Like, I appreciate you. You don't owe me anything. When we see each other again, I like you. I'm gonna try and kill you. It'll be good. It'll be great. Oh, 1700s French and England. French and English. Oh boy. I think there's probably a little bit of action left before things reach another low point. Yes, men will do anything except go to therapy. Alright, let's continue with chapter 22, the Ballet of La Merleson. On the morrow, nothing was talked of in Paris but the ball which the aldermen of the city were to give to the king and queen, and in which their majesties were to dance the famous La Merleson, the favorite ballet of the king. 8 days had been occupied in preparations at the Hotel de Ville for this important evening. The city carpenters had erected scaffolds upon which the invited ladies were to be placed. The city grocer had ornamented the chambers with 200 flambeaux of white wax, a piece of luxury unheard of at that period, and 20 violins were ordered, and the price for them fixed at double the usual rate, upon condition, said the report, that they should be played all night. At 10 o'clock in the morning, the Sieur de Lacoste, ensign in the King's Guards, followed by 2 officers and several archers of that body, came to the city registrar, named Clement, and demanded of him all the keys of the rooms and offices of the hotel. These keys were given up to him instantly. Each of them had a ticket attached to it, by which it might be recognized, and from that moment the Sieur de Lacoste was charged with the care of all the doors and all the avenues. At 11 o'clock came in his turn Duhallier, captain of the guards, bringing with him 50 archers, who were distributed immediately through the Hotel de Ville at the doors assigned them. At 3 o'clock came 2 companies of the guards, one French, the other Swiss. The company of French guards was composed of half of Monsieur Duhallier's men and half of Monsieur Dessau's men. Quick reminder, at this time the Swiss were famous mercenaries, like the best money could buy. At 6 in the evening, the guests began to come. As fast as they entered, they were placed in the grand saloon, on the platforms prepared for them. At 9 o'clock, Madame la Première Présidente arrived. As next to the Queen, she was the most considerable personage of the fete. She was received by the city officials and placed in a box opposite to that which the Queen was to occupy. At 10 o'clock, the King's collation, consisting of preserves and other delicacies, was prepared in the little room on the side of the church of Saint Jean, in front of the silver buffet of the city, which was guarded by 4 archers. I think the only active Swiss mercenary company, such as it is the Swiss Guard at the Vatican, right? I don't think they have anything else. Other than that, they're strictly, that's I thought. Okay. At midnight, great cries and loud acclamations were heard. It was the King, who was passing through the streets which led from the Louvre to the Hotel de Ville, and which were all illuminated with colored lanterns. Immediately, the aldermen, clothed in their cloth robes and preceded by 6 sergeants, each holding a flambeau in his hand, went to attend upon the King, whom they met on the steps, where the provost of the merchants made him the speech of welcome, a compliment to which his Majesty replied with an apology for coming so late, laying the blame upon the cardinal, who had detained him till 11 o'clock, talking of affairs of state. His Majesty, in full dress, was accompanied by His Royal Highness, Monsieur le Comte de Soissons, by the Grand Prior, by the Duc de Longueville, and by the Duc de Euboeuf, by the Comte de Harcourt, and by the Comte de la Roche-Guyon, by Monsieur de Liancourt, by Monsieur de Baradas, by the Comte de Cramail, and by the Chevalier de Souveret. Everybody noticed that the king looked dull and preoccupied. Okay, was that string of names really, really necessary? Really? A private room had been prepared for the king and another for Monsieur. In each of these closets were placed masquerade dresses. The same had been done for the Queen and Madame the President. The nobles and ladies of their Majesty's suites were to dress, 2 by 2, in chambers prepared for the purpose. Before entering his closet, the king desired to be informed the moment the cardinal arrived. Half an hour after the entrance of the king, fresh acclamations were heard. These announced the arrival of the queen. The aldermen did as they had done before, and preceded by their sergeants, advanced to receive their illustrious guest. The queen entered the great hall, and it was remarked that, like the king, she looked dull and even wary. At the moment she entered, the curtain of a small gallery, which to that time had been closed, was drawn, and the pale face of the cardinal appeared, he being dressed as a Spanish cavalier. His eyes were fixed upon those of the queen, and a smile of terrible joy passed over his lips. The queen did not wear her diamond studs. The queen remained for a short time to receive the compliments of the city dignitaries, and to reply to the salutations of the ladies. All at once, the king appeared with the cardinal at one of the doors of the hall. The cardinal was speaking to him in a low voice, and the king was very pale. The king made his way through the crowd without a mask, and the ribbons of his doublet scarcely tied. He went straight to the queen, and in an altered voice said, "Why, madame, have you not thought proper to wear your diamond studs, when you know it would give me so much gratification?" The queen cast a glance around her, and saw the cardinal behind with a diabolical smile on his countenance. "Sire," replied the queen with a faltering voice, "because, in the midst of such a crowd as this, I feared some accident might happen to them." "And you were wrong, madame. If I made you that present, it was that you might adorn yourself therewith. I tell you that you were wrong." The voice of the king was tremulous with anger. Everybody looked and listened with astonishment, comprehending nothing of what passed. "Sire," said the queen, "I can send for them to the Louvre, where they are, and thus your majesty's wishes will be complied with." "Do so, madame, do so, and that at once, for within an hour the ballet will commence." The queen bent in token of submission, and followed the ladies who were to conduct her to her room. On his part, the king returned to his apartment. There was a moment of trouble and confusion in the assembly. Everybody had remarked that something had passed between the king and queen, but both of them had spoken so low that everybody, out of respect, withdrew several steps, so that nobody had heard anything. The violins began to sound with all their might, but nobody listened to them. The king came out first from his room. He was in a most elegant hunting costume, and Monsieur and the other nobles were dressed like him. This was the costume that best became the king. So dressed, he really appeared the first gentleman of his kingdom. The cardinal drew near to the king, and placed in his hand a small casket. The king opened it, and found in it 2 diamond studs. "What does this mean?" demanded he of the cardinal. "Nothing," replied the latter. "Only, if the queen has the studs, which I very much doubt, count them, sire, and if you only find 10, ask her majesty who can have stolen from her the 2 studs that are here." The king looked at the cardinal as if to interrogate him, but he had not time to address any question to him. A cry of admiration burst from every mouth. If the king appeared to be the first gentleman of his kingdom, the queen was without doubt the most beautiful woman in France. It is true that the habit of a huntress became her admirably. She wore a beaver hat with blue feathers, a surtout of grey pearl velvet, fastened with diamond clasps, and a petticoat of blue satin, embroidered with silver. On her left shoulder sparkled the diamond studs, on a bow of the same color as the plumes and the petticoat. The king trembled with joy, and the cardinal with vexation. Although distant as they were from the queen, they could not count the studs. The queen had them. The only question was, had she 10 or 12? At that moment, the violins sounded the signal for the ballet. The king advanced toward Madame the President, with whom he was to dance, and His Highness Monsieur with the queen. They took their places, and the ballet began. The king danced facing the queen, and every time he passed her, he devoured with his eyes those studs of which he could not ascertain the number. Cold sweat covered the brow of the cardinal. The ballet lasted an hour. and had 16 entrees. The ballet ended amid the applause of the whole assemblage, and everyone reconducted his lady to her place. But the king took advantage of the privilege he had of leaving his lady, to advance eagerly toward the queen. "I thank you, madame," said he, "for the deference you have shown to my wishes, but I think you want 2 of the studs, and I bring them back to you." With these words he held out to the queen the 2 studs the cardinal had given him. "How, sire?" cried the young queen, affecting surprise. "You are giving me, then, 2 more? I shall have 14. In fact, the king counted them, and the 12 studs were all on her majesty's shoulder. The king called the cardinal. "What does this mean, monsieur cardinal?" asked the king in a severe tone. "This means, sire," replied the cardinal, "that I was desirous of presenting her majesty with these 2 studs, and that, not daring to offer them myself, I adopted this means of inducing her to accept them." "And I am the more grateful to your eminence," replied Anne of Austria, with a smile that proved she was not the dupe of this ingenious gallantry, "from being certain that these 2 studs alone have cost you as much as all the others cost his majesty." Then, saluting the king and the cardinal, the queen resumed her way to the chamber in which she had dressed, and where she was to take off her costume. The attention which we have been obliged to give during the commencement of the chapter to the illustrious personages we have introduced into it has diverted us from an instant from him to whom Anne of Austria owed the extraordinary triumph she had obtained over the cardinal, and who, confounded, unknown, lost in the crowd gathered at one of the doors, looked on at this scene comprehensible only to 4 persons: the king, the queen, his eminence, and himself. The queen had just regained her chamber, and D'Artagnan was about to retire, when he felt his shoulder lightly touched. He turned and saw a young woman, who made him a sign to follow her. The face of this young woman was covered with a black velvet mask, but notwithstanding this precaution, which was in fact taken rather against others than against him, he at once recognized his usual guide, the light and intelligent Madame Bonacieux. In the evening before, they had scarcely seen each other for a moment at the apartment of the Swiss guard, Germain, whither D'Artagnan had sent for her. The haste which the young woman was in to convey to the queen the excellent news of the happy return of her messenger prevented the 2 lovers from exchanging more than a few words. D'Artagnan therefore followed Madame Bonacieux, moved by a double sentiment, love and curiosity. All the way, and in proportion as the corridors became more deserted, D'Artagnan wished to stop the young woman, seize her, and gaze upon her, were it only for a minute, but quick as a bird she glided between his hands, and when he wished to speak to her, her finger placed upon her mouth, with a little imperative gesture, full of grace, reminded him that he was under the command of a power of which he must blindly obey, and which forbade him to even make the slightest complaint. At length, after winding about for a minute or 2, Madame Bonacieux opened the door of a closet, which was entirely dark, and led D'Artagnan into it. There she made a fresh sign of silence, and opened a second door, concealed by a tapestry. The opening of this door disclosed a brilliant light, and she disappeared. D'Artagnan remained for a moment motionless, asking himself where he could be, but soon a ray of light which penetrated through the chamber, together with the warm and perfumed air which reached him from the same aperture, the conversation of 2 or of 3 ladies in language at once respectful and refined, and the word majesty, several times repeated, indicated clearly that he was in a closet attached to the queen's apartment. The young man waited in comparative darkness and listened. The queen appeared cheerful and happy, which seemed to astonish the persons who surrounded her and who were accustomed to see her almost always sad and full of care. The queen attributed this joyous feeling to the beauty of the fete, to the pleasure she had experienced in the ballet, and, as it is not permissible to contradict a queen, whether she smile or weep, everybody expatiated on the gallantry of the aldermen of the city of Paris. Although D'Artagnan did not at all know the queen, he soon distinguished her voice from the others, at first by a slightly foreign accent, and next by that tone of domination naturally impressed upon all royal words. He heard her approach and withdraw from the partially open door, and twice or three times he even saw the shadow of a person intercept the light. At length, a hand and an arm, surpassingly beautiful in their form and whiteness, glided through the tapestry. D'Artagnan at once comprehended that this was his recompense. He cast himself on his knees, seized the hand, and touched it respectfully with his lips. Then the hand was withdrawn, leaving him in his an object which he perceived to be a ring. The door immediately closed, and D'Artagnan found himself again in complete obscurity. D'Artagnan placed the ring on his finger, and again waited. It was evident that all was not yet over. After the reward of his devotion, that of his love was to come. Besides, although the ballet was danced, the evening had scarcely begun. Supper was to be served at 3, and the clock of St. Jean had struck 2:75. The sound of voices diminished by degrees in the adjoining chamber. The company was then heard departing. Then the door of the closet, in which D'Artagnan was opened, and Madame Bonacieux entered. "You at last!" cried D'Artagnan. "Silence!" said the young woman, placing her hand upon her lips. "Silence, and go the same way you came." "But where and when shall I see you again?" cried D'Artagnan. "A note, which you will find at home, will tell you. Begone, begone!" At these words, she opened the door of the corridor and pushed D'Artagnan out of the room. D'Artagnan obeyed like a child, without the least resistance or objection, which proved that he was really in love. Alright, that brings us to the end of chapter 22. This next one is on the longer side, so we should probably call that an end for tonight's reading. So we'll just have a quick chat about the resolution of that last arc, which, honestly, for as much as we've seen going on, this could be the end of a shorter novel. Like, we've had the tension, the climax, the resolution, everything working its way out. There hasn't been like full resolution, but this could be like not even a short story, just a short-ish novel. So, but with that said, we're about 1/3 of the way. So we've got quite a lot left, a lot more adventure and misadventure to be found. And yeah, from this page we're at like 34%. So we're making good progress, but it's remarkable how much story you can get even in that chunk. I wish this had proper pages so I could tell about how deep we'd be in like a paper book, but yeah, the problems of the reading. But yeah, so that was fun. It was nice to see the Cardinal one-upped. He was so smug with everything, with plotting it in the first place, and then giving the king the 2 studs, which had escaped the blockade. So they'd already left England before D'Artagnan got there. So they were ready. They very nearly had everything play out exactly as they wanted. And then, between the Duke preparing the 2 extra, and D'Artagnan making his frantic flight to and from England in the middle of the night, ended up with the Cardinal with a little egg on his face, and out, presumably, quite a lot of money. So, it was nice to see that. Nice to see. Which, it is interesting that we're rooting for the Queen, the who is presumably working toward a little bit of adultery, and we're rooting against the cardinal and the king, which is an awkward feeling, if we're being honest. Like, I understand that the cardinal is presented as the villain in all this, and yes, he does scheme and manipulate and twist things, but at the same time, he's not really wrong. And yeah, I am shocked again at how wonderful the dialogue is. The swashbuckling adventure plays out well. The action scenes are great. You get the periodic duels, the heroic stands, and you get it all plays out so well. And then on the just beyond that, Dumas's dialogue and conversation writing is fantastic. It is like very believable, very honest as it plays out. So it's a joy to read. And when certain characters are going back and forth, it's really easy. Like, I have to catch myself and slow myself down because it's so easy to just get into a flow. So it's fun. I'm enjoying this one quite a lot. The only thing against it at this point is that it is just so darn long. And that's not really bad. It just is a challenge for our formatting. If I was reading this by a fireside myself, it'd be awesome. And it's still awesome in our formatting. It's just going to be a long series. Because we're at 5 and about a third of the way through, so we're looking at about a 15-part series, which is pretty long. Pretty long. Not a complaint. We've got a lot more fun ahead of us, but it's a lot. I'm glad it comes along well. I think having enthusiasm for what I'm reading helps. I imagine I was a little less fun to listen to when we were reading Walden, because Thoreau's a git. But we do what we can with what we're given. And Dumas makes it a joy and easy to have fun with. All right, guys. Yeah, that's a hard one to enjoy. I don't think Walden is intended to be enjoyed. It's not meant to be a fun read. It's meant to be portentous and thick-headed and pompous. It's intended to make you angry. Yes, it's a sermon. So, that's fine. It's okay not to like everything we read. It just means that the ones that we do like are all the better for the comparison, right? You can't appreciate the Dumas without the Thoreau. All right, guys, that is as good a point as I can think to end. So let's go ahead and wrap it up right about on time tonight. So if you have not yet, I urge you to drop a like on the stream. We are always trying to grow our little community here. We are actually, I noticed we're coming up very quickly on 6 months since we started this. We've got a few people that have been here right about from the beginning, and it's been a joy. I am always thankful for that, for you being here and taking part. Whether it be catching us in the VODs or on the streams, everyone is appreciated. And the best way we can sort of give back and share the love all around is to tweak the algorithm and convince it to get some more people in here. We love what we do here, and we love to share the love of reading that we do. And yeah, it is crazy to think that it's already been that long. I was looking at the stream timings, and I think the 31st is actually our half anniversary. So we are coming up very quickly on it. I don't think I have anything specifically planned for the half Annie. I do have a birthday coming up just before then, so I don't want to jam too many special things all up together. But we'll at least commemorate the occasion, say something. If we make it when we make it to the actual first anniversary, we'll do some sort of special event, special reading or such. And actually, that works out pretty well. If I do something special for anniversary and then something special for birthday, that's about half a year each way. That gives me enough time to recover, I'd hope. So, all right, let's go ahead and leave off here. So there'll be something special in the works, and we'll see what other trouble we can get up to in the meantime. Until then, we will be back on Friday night to continue the Three Musketeers. We're sort of at a resolution stage and probably getting ready to set the stage for the next conflict and climax, because I'm sure our four lovable idiots will get into more and more trouble. Just as far as we know, D'Artagnan's the only one that's made it back to France. So the others will certainly have to come from somewhere. And they'll probably come with their own adventures. So let's come back on Friday and find out what we have in store. Until then, have a wonderful night. Thank you very much for joining me, and good night.